This is a case that has really touched so many because of the sheer brutality of the torture and abuse of this young boy by the two people who should have been taking care of him.
For him, it's personal. He takes aim at the Department of Children and Family Services.
What they did is almost as bad as what Pearl and Isauro did.
And I know I'm not alone in hoping that they experience the same abuse in their lifetime and worse.
How do we explain the unexplainable? How do we understand a tragedy so deep, so harrowing, that it shakes us to our core? In a world where children are meant to feel safe, loved, and protected, what happens when that trust is shattered? This is the story of Gabriel Fernandez, an 8-year-old boy whose life was filled with unimaginable pain. Despite the warnings and calls for help, a story of betrayal, neglect, and a system that failed to protect him. In 2013, Gabriel's death revealed the unimaginable. A child subjected to abuse beyond comprehension, with a world that failed to protect him. Despite multiple warnings, despite voices speaking out, Gabriel was left to suffer in silence until it was too late. This is more than a story about one child's death. It's about the broken systems, the missed opportunities, and the devastating consequences when we fail to act in the face of a child's cries for help. Today, we're going to take a deep look at Gabriel's life, the unimaginable horrors he faced, and the journey for justice that followed. His story will stay with you long after you hear it. Because Gabriel wasn't just a victim, he was a child, a son, a brother. And his life mattered. Gabriel Fernandez was born on February 20th, 2005, to Pearl Fernandez and Arnold Contreras in the small town of Palmdale, California. From the very start of his life, Gabriel's situation was one marked by instability and neglect. His mother, Pearl, gave him up shortly after birth, and he was raised by his great-uncle, Michael Limos Carranza, and Carranza's partner, David Martinez. Gabriel spent his early years in this seemingly stable home, but in 2009, at the age of 4, his life took another turn when he was sent to live with his grandparents. This change came after Gabriel's grandfather expressed disapproval of Carranza and Martinez's same-sex relationship. During his time with his grandparents, Gabriel received care and attention, but this would be lived in 2012. When Gabriel was 7 years old, his biological mother, Pearl Fernandez, sought to regain custody of him, primarily driven by her desire to collect welfare benefits, according to some reports. Her return to claim Gabriel's custody would prove to be the beginning of his nightmarish ordeal. Once Gabriel was returned to his mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, Isauro Aguirre, his life would descend into months of torture. Pearl's relationship with Isauro, a man with a violent history, would be instrumental in the abuse Gabriel would suffer. This marked the beginning of a tragic 8-month period during which Gabriel was subjected to some of the most severe abuse imaginable. Gabriel's teachers and other adults began to notice signs of abuse almost immediately after he returned to his mother's care. His first-grade teacher, Jennifer Garcia, became deeply concerned when Gabriel asked her if it was normal to be beaten with a belt and to bleed from the injuries.
I had to look at those kids in the face and I had to tell them that their classmate was not coming back.
Answering their probing questions.
I had to explain to those kids, his mom killed him. They would say, what happened to him? You know, I had to explain to them that there's good people and bad people in the world, and sometimes those bad people could be parents.
This was not a casual question, but a cry for help, signaling that something was deeply wrong at home. Garcia, recognizing the severity of the situation, called the Child Welfare Hotline, and a social worker, Stephanie Rodriguez, was assigned to Gabriel's case. However, despite multiple reports of Gabriel's abuse, including visible injuries such as a fat lip and missing hair, nothing substantial was done to protect him.
In the shaky, unsure handwriting of a first grader, Gabriel's teacher reads a note she found hidden in the 8-year-old's desk a few days after she learned of his brutal death.
I love you, Mom, and Gabriel is a good boy.
Over the months that followed, Gabriel's abuse intensified. He was subjected to repeated beatings with fists and blunt objects, including a baseball bat.
Are you sure that that's what really happened? And then he did eventually tell me, and he was like really angry, and he said, well, it's because my mom shot me in the face with a BB gun.
Garcia said she called DCFS multiple times and then realized Gabriel was suffering more abuse because of it.
I didn't want to call. I didn't know what to do. I don't know, I could look at his face and, not be able to assure him that that wasn't going to happen again when I couldn't say that.
When Gabriel was absent for several days, Garcia was told he had been sent to live with family in Texas. The teacher hoped this was true. Roughly a week later, Gabriel was dead.
The abuse wasn't just physical, but psychological as well.
Services.
She's like, well, sometimes my mom makes me bleed. And I said, well, where do you bleed? And he says, well, on my bottom. Because she hits me with a belt. And he's like, you know that part with the metal on it? He's like, that part.
Gabriel was forced to sleep in a small cupboard, bound, gagged, and sometimes blindfolded.
Wrenching testimony underscored by a graphic display.
So let the record reflect that the detective's holding a black, high-powered BB gun.
The weapons Aguirre used to beat Gabriel over an 8-month period. A metal baton and wooden bats. Aguirre's trial revealed that Gabriel would be beaten anytime social workers would ask questions about his injuries.
There is a testimony from Gabriel's brother stating the brutal abuse he witnessed when Gabriel was abused. He was regularly deprived of food, and when he was fed, he was made to eat cat litter, spoiled food, and even his own vomit. His treatment was not only cruel, but calculated to humiliate and degrade him. In addition to the physical abuse, Gabriel suffered from emotional torment. He was forced to wear girls' clothing as a form of further punishment. The motivations behind this abuse, particularly from Isoro Aguirre, were reportedly linked to his belief that Gabriel was gay. Aguirre reportedly felt disgusted by this perceived homosexuality and used this as an excuse for the abuse. Despite numerous reports of abuse, Gabriel's situation worsened, and nothing was done to intervene. His teacher, Jennifer Garcia, continued to report the injuries she observed, including a fat lip and patches of missing hair. Every time Garcia made a report, the response from the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, was the same. A social worker would follow up.
Gabriel's teacher.
And then I do the whys. Why didn't they ask this? Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they go a step farther? Why didn't they take him out? And I go through all those questions, and it eats at my stomach. I think about it every day, all the time.
However, these follow-ups were not sufficient to protect Gabriel. The social workers, including Stephanie Rodriguez, never took Gabriel to a doctor for a proper examination. Each time, the social workers failed to speak directly to Gabriel and instead only spoke with his mother, who lied about the cause of his injuries. 3 weeks before Gabriel's murder, a security guard at the Department of Social Services noticed Gabriel's injuries when his mother brought him into the office. Gabriel had visible cigarette burns on his scalp, bruises around his eyes, and various marks on his body. Despite the severity of his injuries, the guard was instructed not to report the incident in order to avoid overtime work. Ultimately, the security guard took matters into his own hands and contacted the sheriff's department. However, even after this report, Gabriel was not removed from the home. On May 22, 2013, Gabriel was beaten by Pearl and Isaro for not cleaning up his toys. This brutal assault left him unresponsive, and Pearl called 911. Paramedics arrived and transported Gabriel to Antelope Valley Hospital, where he was declared brain dead. 2 days later, on May 24, 2013, Gabriel passed away at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. The autopsy revealed the full extent of Gabriel's abuse, with multiple rib fractures, signs of blunt force trauma, burns, and severe malnutrition. His death was ruled as a result of blunt force trauma, compounded by neglect and malnutrition. In the wake of Gabriel's death, there was widespread outrage over the fact that no one had intervened to stop the abuse. Public outrage turned into action when the Los Angeles District Attorney, Jackie Lacey, made the controversial decision to charge social workers involved in Gabriel's case. For social workers, Stephanie Rodriguez, Patricia Clement, Kevin Bohm, and Gregory Merritt were charged with criminal neglect and falsifying public records.
The proposal is pushed by Gabriel's cousin, Emily Carranza, who pins blame on Gabriel's social workers.
They had the upper hand, I honestly believe, to remove him and save him, but they didn't.
The head of DCFS says since Gabriel's death, the system has been overhauled.
We have added thousands of caseworkers, which have increased the capability of us to be able to work very closely with families.
However, despite the evidence of negligence, the charges against the social workers were later dismissed by the California Court of Appeals in 2020. The court ruled that the social workers did not have the legal responsibility to remove Gabriel from the home, a decision that left many feeling that justice for Gabriel had not been served. Pearl Fernandez and Isaro Aguirre were charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances of torture. Aguirre, who had been directly responsible for much of the abuse, was sentenced to death, although his execution date is uncertain due to California's moratorium on the death penalty. Pearl, in an effort to avoid the death penalty, pled guilty to first-degree murder with special circumstances of torture and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Isaro Aguirre's trial was a lengthy and intense legal process, which saw him convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances of torture. During the trial, the prosecution painted Aguirre as a cruel and sadistic individual, describing his actions as pure evil. The defense attempted to argue that Aguirre was a kind man before meeting Pearl, highlighting his previous work as a caregiver at a retirement home. However, the jury found the prosecution's argument convincing and convicted Aguirre, sentencing him to death.
The repeated beatings, burning, starving, binding, shooting Gabriel with BBs that were embedded in different parts of his body, knocking his teeth out with a bat, locking him in a dark cabinet while he's bound, and starving this poor child. It is unimaginable the pain that this child probably endured. And from what I heard, Gabriel was a kind, loving individual who just wanted to be loved. You know, I can only wish, I really do, that you both, in the middle of the night, you wake up and you think of the injuries that you subjected this poor young man, and that it tortures you.
The judge also said he doesn't believe Pearl Fernandez and 37-year-old Isaro Aguirre are even capable of feeling true remorse. Aguirre was found guilty by a jury. They recommended the death penalty. It's very rare in California. The last execution here was 11 years ago. During the trial, prosecutors called him an evil man who liked torturing Gabriel, who he thought acted like he was gay. Shortly after Aguirre's conviction, Pearl Fernandez struck a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Today, both sat stone-faced. At one point, Pearl Fernandez spoke. She said she wished she could have saved Gabriel, then criticized extended family who've come forward to honor him, saying they never really knew him. Gabriel's first-grade teacher also spoke. She saw signs of abuse and went to authorities trying to get help. Now she says she's racked with guilt and sadness.
For the last 5 years, Gabriel has been number 28 in my classroom. I don't assign number 28 to another student because I feel that it's only his number now. And it's a way for me to honor him in my classroom. It almost makes it like he's still here. I find comfort in believing he is now at peace.
The death of Gabriel Fernandez serves as a grim reminder of the failures of the child welfare system. His case highlights the devastating consequences of systemic neglect, the dangers of underreporting, and the need for better accountability within agencies like the DCFS. Gabriel's story also brings attention to the psychological and emotional toll that abuse can have on children, as well as the societal need for greater protection for vulnerable minors. The story of Gabriel Fernandez is one of unimaginable suffering and the failure of systems that should have protected him. His tragic death led to significant public outcry and sparked a broader conversation about the inadequacies in child protection services. Gabriel's name has become synonymous with the failure of those entrusted with the welfare of children, and his story continues to serve as a painful reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and accountability in the fight to protect vulnerable children. His death remains a symbol of the need for greater scrutiny of child welfare agencies, as well as for more rigorous efforts to prevent such tragedies in the future.